thought I had found true love, until my new sister-in-law raised her champagne glass at my wedding and said, "Welcome to the family. But don't worry, third marriages usually fall apart faster." The entire room fell silent, and from that moment, secrets began to leak like cracks spreading across a shattered wine glass. They thought I would stay quiet. They thought I would endure, but they forgot one thing. I didn't come here to endure. I came to end it all in a way they would never see coming. Chapter 1. The Strange Congratulations. I never thought a congratulatory toast at a wedding could be so cold. Heather, my new sister-in-law, lifted her glass, smiling as if she were about to announce some delightful news. "Congratulations on joining the family. Don't worry, third marriages usually fall apart even faster." The entire table fell silent. Knives and forks froze mid-air, fake smiles vanished. I could hear the sharp intake of breath from the relatives around us. "Right then, James?" My brother calmly placed a white envelope on Heather's plate. He looked at her, no smile. "No joke. Well, isn't that something? Your ex-husband's lawyer just sent this over. Henry's new will. From beyond the grave. Enjoy your $1, Mrs. Thompson." The air seemed to crack open with a quiet shock. I still didn't understand what was happening, but it was clear Heather had crossed a line. And James had too. Yet no one seemed surprised except me. I turned to Daniel, my newly wedded husband, hoping he would laugh, break the tension. At the very least, defend me from my sister-in-law's blatant insult. But he just sat there, head bowed, saying nothing, his glass of wine untouched. He was stiff, unnaturally silent. And it was that very silence that planted the first seed of unease in me. I thought Heather was talking nonsense. I had only been married once before to Tom, an old friend. We parted on peaceful terms. Daniel knew all about it. We'd talked about it on our second date in a little Italian restaurant downtown. So why wasn't he speaking up now? "Daniel," I asked, my voice low but heavy with suspicion. "What is she talking about?" Daniel looked at me. His eyes were sunken, and in them flashed something I didn't want to believe: guilt. That was the first moment I saw the man I had just entrusted my life to, hiding something from me. "Elizabeth, can we talk about this later?" he whispered. "No." I answered, firmer this time. "Why later? If everyone here already knows, then it seems I'm the last one invited into the secret." I glanced around. Familiar faces suddenly felt like strangers. Every pair of eyes avoided mine as if they were watching a wreck unfold and didn't dare step in. That was when James spoke again. This time not to defend me, but to end the dinner. Not with noise, but with a single sentence, his gaze cold as stone. "Since we're sharing family secrets, Heather, I think you should open that envelope." She froze, and for the first time that evening I saw the smile vanish from Heather's face. Her fingers trembled slightly as she tore the edge of the envelope. The papers inside rustled softly, but the sound cut through the thick air like a blade. She read, and the color drained from her cheeks, pink fading into pale white. Everyone watched her, but I watched Daniel, and for the first time I asked myself, how well do I really know this man? Chapter 2, The First Signs. I don't clearly remember how I left that dinner. Everything was blurry, as if I were walking through a dream I didn't yet know was a nightmare. After that night, Daniel and I barely spoke. Not because I was furious, but because I was analyzing. I needed silence. I needed to piece together fragments of a picture I probably never wanted to look at from the start. The next morning, when Daniel tried to make me coffee as usual, I quietly walked out of the kitchen. Not out of hatred, but because I was afraid I might say something I couldn't take back. I spent the entire morning alone in my study, the space that used to be my creative corner, before Daniel convinced me to quit my job, so I could fully dedicate myself to married life. Back then, I thought it was an act of love. Looking at it now, perhaps not so much. I opened old photos, the first messages he had sent me, the surprise gifts, the weekend trips, the promises of a sweet life. I had fallen in love so quickly that I never had the time to ask questions, and now sitting still, I began to see the strange details. For example, the fact that he had never introduced me to any close friends. We only ever dined with his work circle partners, employees. None of them knew Daniel before me. Close friends. There weren't any, I had asked once. He only smiled. They're all busy. You'll meet them eventually. And then there was the way he always kept his phone on silent, face down. Or how he avoided talking about the time he spent in his old city, where he had supposedly restarted his career after 2 failed startups. Now I wondered, was that really a career? That night when Daniel went to bed early, I crept downstairs and found our marriage certificate. I knew exactly where it was in the desk drawer in the study. We had once laughed as we put it there. This is our official proof of love now, but this time I opened it as though I were unwrapping a truth no one wanted spoken aloud. Full name, Daniel Morrison. Date of marriage, March 15th. But one small detail made me stop cold: his signature. The handwriting didn't match the cards he had once written to me. Too careful, too precise, as if he were pretending. At that moment, I still couldn't face the truth. But deep down, I knew Daniel had done this before, not just once. The next morning, I called the county marriage registrar's office. The woman on the other end sounded warm and polite. May I have your name? Please, Elizabeth Morrison. Formerly Elizabeth Chin. I'd like to verify a marriage record. She went quiet for a moment, typing. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I need to clarify. Which Elizabeth? Are you Mr. Daniel Morrison has 3 marriage records with 3 different women named Elizabeth. I froze in the kitchen, an icy chill running down my spine. 3 Elizabeths. I hung up without a word, my heart shattering into pieces. It wasn't just the sting of betrayal. It was the crushing sense of being replaceable, as though I were merely the next version in a chain of prototypes he had tested before. I thought of every time I trusted him, everything I had given up for him. I pressed a hand against my chest where my heart was pounding so violently it hurt with every beat. And then I knew I would not stay silent like the women before me. I would find out everything. I would speak to the other Elizabeths, and I would show Daniel this time he chose the wrong woman. Chapter 3. The Wives Before Me. I spent the entire night tossing and turning, eyes wide open against the ceiling, my mind spinning with endless, unanswered questions. 3 women named Elizabeth. Was it coincidence or design? I couldn't do anything but investigate. I needed to meet them. I needed to know what kind of man I was truly dealing with. I started with public records. Part of me felt ashamed I hadn't looked before marrying him. But then again, who in love checks their partner's past like they're hiring an employee? The first name that surfaced was Sarah Mitchell, married to Daniel in 2016, divorced after just 11 months. Current residence, Oregon. It took me nearly 3 hours of digging through online traces. Sarah had changed her last name. Her profile picture locked down her accounts. Clearly, she wanted to disappear. But eventually, I found one open Facebook account, a local moms group in her city. I created a fake profile, a fake name, a fake reason I'm writing a novel inspired by mysterious marriages and would like to interview you. It sounded ridiculous. But surprisingly, she replied, Daniel Morrison. He's a living nightmare. Don't let the charm fool you. Don't believe the candlelit dinners and the promises of a happy future. He controlled every detail of my life. And when I fought back, I was threatened with things I couldn't even imagine. She stopped there, then followed with just 2 words NDA signed. I understood. He had forced her to sign a non-disclosure agreement. One wife legally silenced. The second, Jennifer Huang, married in 2018. Divorced after 14 months. She was even harder to reach. Instagram gone. LinkedIn reduced to scraps. But then I found an old email address buried in an outdated blog about interior design. I sent a message. Waited 2 days. Nothing. On the 3rd day, a reply came. I can't go into details. I've been silent for too long. But if you're caught in Daniel Morrison's cycle, get out as soon as possible. Don't end up like me. That was all. But it was more than enough. I sat frozen on the floor, surrounded by my laptop notes, documents, and a heart being squeezed tighter and tighter. He wasn't just deceitful. He had a system, a strategy, a pattern, and this time I was the third iteration. But what Daniel didn't anticipate was this. I had a brother named James, and Heather, the sharp-tongued woman who had humiliated me with her "Welcome to the family third marriages fail faster" was either his willing accomplice, or worse, the perfect reflection of him in a chain of manipulation. I had been dragged into a play I never knew I was the protagonist of, but I was awake now, and once awake, I was no longer a victim. I was the one rewriting the script. Chapter 4: The Crack in the Perfect Wall. As the truth about the previous wives slowly came to light, I began to re-examine my own marriage, and the things I once mistook as care now revealed themselves clearly as tactics of control. Daniel told me to quit my job because he earned enough for both of us. Back then, I thought it was romantic. Now I realized it was the first step to make me dependent on him. He told me to limit contact with certain friends because they bring negative energy. I believed him, and little by little, I narrowed my circle. Even the smallest things like my fondness for red nail polish, he would advise. "Two flashy nude suits you better." I once laughed thinking it was a sign of his attentiveness. But pieced together, I understood every suggestion. Every advice was molding me into the version he wanted, not who I truly was. One morning, as I poured Daniel's coffee, I noticed my hands trembling. Not from the heat, but from fear he might be displeased if it wasn't sweet enough. I feared a glance, a sigh, a fleeting comment. I remembered Sarah's words. "He makes you believe you're the only one, but in truth you're just part of the formula." The formula. That thought consumed me. Daniel didn't love me as an individual. He loved control. And me, Sarah Jennifer, we were just recurring variables in the same equation. That evening, I tried to bring it up with him. "Daniel, I feel like you've been hiding something from me. 2 previous marriages, for example." He looked up, a flicker of panic flashing in his eyes before he quickly masked it with a weary smile. "Elizabeth, I didn't tell you because it wasn't worth it. Short failed marriages, mistakes. I didn't want to burden you by dredging them up." "But why? Were they all Elizabeth's?" I asked, holding his gaze. "Can you explain that?" A long silence stretched between us. He set his cup down and shook his head. "Coincidence. You're overthinking. Coincidence. 3 women with the same name, all trapped in the same cycle. I didn't believe it. But I didn't push. I stayed silent. Because by then, I knew one thing. Whatever Daniel was hiding, he would never confess on his own. I had to uncover it myself. From that day forward, I began recording every small detail. Where he went, who he met, what he said, how he spent. I was no longer the blind wife, I was the observer inside my own marriage. And what I saw chilled me further. Daniel was often absent, claiming client meetings, but never naming names. His phone calendar had odd gaps, blank spaces with no notes, and every time I asked, he only smiled. "You don't need to worry about that." That answer I once accepted, but not anymore. I remembered Sarah's eyes as she spoke about her life with him. I remembered the trembling in Jennifer's words, and I understood if I did nothing, I would only become another tally mark in Daniel's list. That night, as Daniel slept soundly, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, one thought echoing in my mind. This time, he chose the wrong woman. Chapter 5: Clues from the Shadows. I began to realize that to escape this cycle, I couldn't just sit still and wait for Daniel to slip. I needed leads. I needed evidence. And strangely enough, the first pieces came from Heather. The way Heather had thrown that venomous toast at my wedding still haunted me. Not because of her cruel words, but because of the sense. She knew more than I did. Clearly, Heather wasn't just trying to humiliate me. She was hinting at a truth everyone else already knew except me. But why I started watching Heather more closely at family gatherings. In public, she was always perfect, elegant dresses, graceful smiles, a sweet voice. But when she thought no one was looking, her eyes turned sharp, calculating. I saw her whispering to a few women, saw their uneasy smiles before they quickly drifted away. Once I happened to overhear Heather murmuring to Daniel's business partner's wife in the kitchen. Her voice was low, urgent, as though she were seeding a secret. When she noticed me walk in, Heather's face shifted instantly into a radiant smile. "Elizabeth, we were just talking about you." "All good things, of course." The woman gave me a forced smile before making a quick exit. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, certain that Heather was quietly poisoning my reputation. But why? Why was she so invested in tearing me down? One evening I sat with James, my brother, in a small cafe. I tried to keep my tone casual, but my eyes betrayed the tension. "Do you ever think Heather is strange?" James sighed, his hand tightening around his coffee cup. "Liz, Heather isn't what you think. She has two faces. Sweet in public, but at home." He hesitated as though weighing whether to continue. "At home, I feel like I'm being watched. She controls the money, the words I say, even the clothes I wear. But the scariest part is, she makes me believe it's all my fault. Every time I doubt her, she twists it around until I'm the one who's wrong." I froze. His words echoed exactly what Sarah had once written to me about Daniel. Control, manipulation, reversal. When James saw my silence, he gently touched my hand. "Liz, you're not yourself anymore since marrying Daniel. You've withdrawn from friends, quit your job, gone silent at family dinners." "That's not my sister." His words struck me like a blade. Now, I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. He was right. I had changed, not out of love, but out of manipulation. I began digging into Heather's past quietly, like a predator, waiting for the right moment. In old emails James had once asked me to organize, I stumbled upon a letter from Henry's lawyer, Heather's late husband. It wasn't the will James had pulled out at the wedding, but a private letter addressed to the lawyer just weeks before Henry died. In it, Henry voiced his suspicions Heather was having an affair. He had hired a private investigator, and the findings were a file of photos, messages, hotel bills. The man in the pictures was none other than Marcus Webb, Henry's close friend and the brother-in-law of Heather's second husband. The letter ended with a line shaky but unmistakable. "She hasn't only betrayed me, she's planning to leave, and she'll take whatever she can with her." My heart pounded as I read it. Heather wasn't just a venomous tongue. She was a predator, and Henry may have paid the price with his life. I printed every document, filed them neatly into a folder. For the first time in weeks, I felt no longer cornered. Heather thought I was weak. Daniel thought I would endure. They were both wrong. I was no longer simply Elizabeth, the third wife. I was Elizabeth, the woman gathering weapons for the final war. And next time I raised my glass, it wouldn't be to celebrate, but to declare war. Chapter 6. Evidence in the Locked Box. After reading the documents about Heather and Henry, I knew I had stumbled upon a secret far bigger than a cruel toast at a wedding. Heather wasn't just sharp-tongued. She was a parasite feeding off deception and betrayal, moving from one man to the next. And James, my brother, was her next victim. But I also understood one thing: to bring down people like Daniel and Heather, emotions alone weren't enough. I needed evidence. Solid, legal, undeniable evidence. I remembered a charity gala Daniel once took me to. Heather had flaunted an emerald necklace glimmering under the lights. When I complimented it, she had smiled with pride, a keepsake from Henry. He had exquisite taste, didn't he? At the time it was just boastful. But now, after reading Henry's final words in that letter to his lawyer, I realized that necklace might be stolen property taken straight from his estate. I immediately contacted the law firm that had represented Henry. I gave my real name and explained that I had information about jewelry that had gone missing from Henry's estate after his death. The lawyer's tone turned tense at once. "You're saying the necklace is still in Heather's possession?" I answered firmly. "I saw her wearing it with my own eyes." He paused, then said, "Photograph it. Anytime you get the chance." We need visual proof to add to the case file. Henry wrote in his journal that she took the piece claiming it was a gift, but he made it clear it never was. In that moment, I understood I was no longer just a wife searching for answers about a crumbling marriage. I was part of a real investigation. At every family gathering afterward, I watched Heather closely. My phone became my hidden weapon. The moment she wore that necklace again, I would capture it. I would turn the very thing she flaunted into evidence against her. But it wasn't just Heather. Daniel, too, was leaving cracks in his facade. I started checking our joint bank account. Even though Daniel always controlled the finances, I still had online access. Yet most large transactions were hidden. I called the bank pretending to check on expenses. The employee said politely, "There are several transfers to subsidiary accounts, but since they're under Mr. Morrison's private company, we can't disclose details." That was all I needed to know. Daniel was hiding something in the dark. The feeling grew stronger each day. Both Daniel and Heather built their lives on lies. One plundered wealth and manipulated her husband. The other treated marriage like a game of power. I sat in the study, staring at a wooden box in front of me. Inside, I placed everything I had gathered: Sarah's emails, Jennifer's messages, Henry's letter, and my own notes. I locked the box and hid the key in a place Daniel would never think to look inside the thick finance book he once gave me, the very book he surely believed I would never read. That night when I heard Daniel come down the stairs, I feigned sleep. But my eyes stayed wide open in the dark. I knew soon I would have enough pieces. And when I fit them together, the complete picture would destroy the entire world they had built. Chapter 7. Breaking her down, step by step. I used to think revenge was a storm, powerful, violent, and loud. But now I understand true revenge is a drizzle that lingers, seeps in slowly until everything rots from within. I started small. Nothing flashy, nothing suspicious. With Heather, I knew she would never see it coming as long as I continued to play the weak one. And that was my greatest strength. At family gatherings, I slipped back into the role of the perfect wife, gentle, quiet, smiling at the right moments. The more submissive I appeared, the more triumphant Heather became. She grew bolder, sharper with her words, more venomous. Meanwhile, I recorded every remark and every action like a meticulous secretary compiling the file of a criminal. I rejoined the Facebook group community of entrepreneurial wives under a fake name. Heather had once run it like her personal kingdom. But I discovered something more. She didn't just use it to boast, she used it to manipulate. Digging through old posts and private exchanges, I found countless instances of Heather spreading rumors about other wives in secret, tearing them down to elevate herself. One woman had once posted about her husband, her struggles in marriage, and the pressure of motherhood. Heather's comment, "Maybe the problem isn't your husband. Maybe you're just not good enough." Cruel, but artfully phrased. I captured everything. Then through an anonymous email, I sent all the evidence to the women Heather had attacked. My message was short. Perhaps it's time to stop letting her sit on a throne built from the pain of others. Within 48 hours, Heather was removed from her role as group moderator. By the end of the week, she was permanently banned for community division. I never had to show my face. It all happened behind the curtain. Daniel, meanwhile, still tried to appear calm, but I knew he sensed something had shifted. I no longer asked for his approval before buying things. I started reconnecting with old friends. I dressed differently, smiled differently. My eyes no longer searched for his validation. And men like Daniel, oh, they're hypersensitive to that. One evening when I came home from work, he was sitting in the kitchen asking casually, "Where were you?" I looked him straight in the eye and answered coolly, "Meeting a friend." "You don't know her." He fell silent, but I saw it in his eyes, fear. Not of losing me, but of losing control. Then came James. I still hadn't told him everything. I needed him to see the truth about his wife himself. But I began planting seeds of doubt. I invited him for coffee, just the two of us. I asked gently, I don't want to meddle in your marriage. But are you happy? He looked at me for a long time, then said, I don't know anymore. That was enough. I knew the door of doubt had been open. I kept gathering evidence. It was no longer just betrayal I now had in my hands. Jewelry receipts proving the emerald necklace was never purchased by Heather. Emails from Henry's lawyer confirming she had once been investigated for estate theft. Testimonies from women in the wives group exposing her toxicity. I placed everything into a folder. On the cover, I wrote a single word, truth. I didn't know when I would use it, but I knew this much that day would come, and when it did, Heather would never rise again. Chapter 8. The Final Performance. I was never one to enjoy family gatherings. They were always loud, artificial, and filled with prying eyes. But this time was different. This time I looked forward to it. My parents' anniversary party was held at the very same venue where Heather had humiliated me on my wedding night. Same room, same seats, same atmosphere of wine-soaked toasts, yet behind them all, a forest of masks. I arrived early. In my hands, a large envelope and a small gift box. No one knew what was inside, but I knew. They were weapons. Heather entered, as usual, chin lifted high, wrapped in designer fabric, her smile the crown of the evening. She waved pretended warmth, as though her banishment from the entrepreneurial wives group had never happened. But I saw her eyes when they flickered across me, tight wary. She could sense something was coming, but it was already too late to run. Daniel arrived late. He avoided my gaze, avoided everyone's. Since the night I silently withdrew from our shared life, he knew everything was crumbling, but he lacked the courage to grasp at what was slipping away. When dessert was served, I placed the envelope on the table, sliding it gently toward James. The room fell instantly silent. James, said my voice calm, as though handing him a birthday card. You should read this. Heather froze. I heard the clatter of silverware falling onto plates, just like the night she had hurled her insult at me. But this time, she was the one under the spotlight. James opened the envelope. Inside were copies of Henry's legal documents, his will, his journal evidence of her affair, and the list of assets she had stolen. Alongside them, a photo of Heather wearing the emerald necklace, the very piece she once bragged was a gift from her late husband. James read aloud slowly each word, carrying through the room. No one interrupted. No one dared. Heather tried to sneer to cut in, but James's voice carried more weight, more truth. When he finished, I lifted the gift box, opened it, and revealed the necklace from the photos, the one Henry had clearly recorded as stolen. I think this belongs back where it should, I said. Heather shot to her feet, trembling, speechless, but no one moved to help her. No one stood at her side anymore, and for the first time in a long while, I saw James exhale. Heather stormed out, tears brimming, not of shame, but of lost control. The room watched her go in silence, eyes cold, no one calling her back. Daniel still said nothing. He only looked at me, his gaze torn between fear and admiration, but it no longer mattered. I was finished with him. That night when we returned home, I placed the divorce papers on the kitchen counter. Daniel walked in and saw them. No explanation was needed. He understood. What do you want? He asked. I answered softly, nothing. I just want freedom, and I had it. Freedom from a false marriage, freedom from manipulators, and most importantly, freedom from the weak version of myself I had once let them create. But what satisfied me most was not Heather's downfall, nor Daniel's. It was that, for the first time in years, I stood tall, head high, and felt no guilt in being myself. Chapter 9. I am myself, and that is enough. I left Daniel's house on a soft, sunlit morning. No tears, no pleas. Just me with a small suitcase, a copy of the divorce papers in my bag, and a new map in my head, a map that led back to myself. The cottage I rented nestled beneath a row of old maples, small, quiet, and unseen by anyone. I didn't bring much. Most of the possessions had been Daniel's anyway. What I carried with me was the only thing of value: freedom. At first it felt strange. I didn't know what kind of flowers I liked or what I wanted for dinner if it wasn't dictated by someone else's schedule. I sat on the little wooden chair on the porch, listened to the birds drink tea, and asked myself, who am I, if not someone's wife? The answer came slowly, in the classical music trickling out of a tiny speaker, in the scent of lasagna I baked for myself, in the moment I drove alone to the beach, pulling over to watch the sunset. No permission asked, no explanation given. I began rewriting my resume. At first it was just to pass the time, but then I realized I missed work. I missed being valued for my skills, not for the role of supportive wife. A month later, I received an offer from a creative marketing firm in the next city over. They had once been competitors of my old company. Now I sat at their conference table as a project consultant, clear-headed, shoulders straight, eyes, no longer avoiding the room. From James I heard that Heather had moved away, far away. She tried to rebuild her image with every trick she knew, but in a small town, the memory of a social scandal does not fade easily. And Daniel, he left too, to a bigger city where his reputation hadn't yet outrun him, a place to start over or to continue the same cycle he knew so well. I didn't care anymore. Each of them had paid the price they deserved, not because of me, but because of the truth. 6 months later, on an autumn evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of champagne, not to celebrate anyone else, but to celebrate myself. I raised my glass to the star-strewn sky, recalling Heather's wedding toast. Welcome to the family. Don't worry, third marriages usually fall apart faster. I smiled. She had no idea. She had been right, just not in the way she thought. I took a sip and whispered, cheers, darling. The third marriage has collapsed, but it wasn't mine. It was yours. Now I was no longer anyone's wife, no longer a victim. I was Elizabeth Chin, whole-strong, reborn from the ashes. I no longer needed anyone to define my worth. I no longer needed a belated apology or a saving embrace. I needed only one thing myself. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I knew without a doubt that was enough. When I walked out of Daniel's house, I didn't take the wedding gifts or the promises of love. I carried only the one thing they had tried to strip from me, myself. And this time, I didn't just leave. I rose. I exposed. I burned it all down. This story doesn't end with an apology or forgiveness. It ends with awakening, with truth, and with justice. And you, what would you do if you discovered you were just the third wife in a repeating cycle? Leave your thoughts below, and don't forget, every week, Scarlet Vows brings you another journey of revenge, colder, fiercer, and more satisfying.